Hello everyone, this is JLS1114. It has now been about 3 months since I switched over from the cane to my guide dog. Hop, hop, hop. She doesn't feel good today, so she might not want to come up. But you didn't get a chance to see her before. Here she is. Yeah. So I decided to do a video of the pros and cons of the cane versus the guide dog, using a guide dog for mobility to get around. Because there's quite a debate about it. Most people who end up going from the cane to the guide dog, which you'll see my points as well, they prefer it. But I have talked to those who would much rather have the cane, and for their reasons. So, just to educate those out there who are not blind, visually impaired, and just curious on more information of the two most popular ways that most blind people pick either the cane or a guide dog to get around. So, and for those who have a cane and they're thinking about getting a guide dog, this may help you, or vice, well, not really so much vice versa. So here we go. Well, guide dog. What's excellent about a guide dog versus using a cane, the advantages, is a guide dog can learn a route. Okay? Your cane can't necessarily learn a route. Well, first, before I go on, because there's a big debate, there was actually a debate about this. Let me back up a little bit. There was actually a debate about this at my school, about having O&M with a cane to be able to move up to the level to get a guide dog. All schools, guide dog schools, one of the requirements they want you to have is that you have some O&M. Now, depending on the school, some will stress it more than others, and how much they would want you to be experienced with it, but all of them would love for you to have some O&M. If you haven't had O&M, which is, for those of you who don't know, orientation and mobility, using the cane, learning to use the cane mostly is what that entails. You can't get a guide dog because you need to have, before to even use a guide dog, you need to have, you need to know routes yourself, or you're just going to confuse your dog. You need to have an idea of what you're doing. You need to know the basics for safety wise of what you are doing. So you need to have these tools in your arsenal to be able to move up to having a guide dog. Okay, guide dog, you don't just, they learn a route and they just, and you think everything, oh cool. No, if you haven't had O&M and you just have no idea, it's your first time, you're just going out on the street and you don't even know the basics of what you need to know in order to get around safely, you're going to have a problem with a guide dog. So, anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. So, going back to guide dog versus the cane. Well, with a guide dog, yeah, like I said, they learn routes. So, yes, either way, you have to know a route. But, say, and this happens a lot, say there's something that got moved on you, or or the weather conditions are just pretty bad, and running you off somehow, or it's trash day and they put trash out. Any kind of obstacle you may not really so much encounter, because the dog knows that route. They can learn. Depending on the school, this changes, but in my school, we teach them. If there's something there, the dog will halt to let you know there's something else there. And if they, do that, we pretty much will tell them, find the way if it's blocked. And they will automatically, think of some other way of doing it. So, you have a pair of perfect eyes, watching things out for you like that. You have a dog to help you avoid obstacles. They will, which I think is one of the main things when I got my dog, I was like, whoa, oh my god, this is excellent. That I don't hit people anymore than versus when having the cane. Having the cane, you're going around hoping that you'll catch something, but the dog will know. The dog will actually see it, its eyes versus just a stick, and figure stuff out for you. And with the cane, you're still apt to hit people accidentally, and with the dog, you're less apt to do that, because the dog will figure it out. It's a human, well, not a human, but living, living, breathing creature, and it's your own personal perfect eyes. So, I barely hit people. Every once in a while, my dog will not be paying attention, and it will happen, but it happens a lot less. Nobody's perfect. So, so that's what really amazes me, and that's what's really, really great about it, opposed to a cane. Like I said, in weather conditions, a dog can adjust. Your cane will only pick up so much. So that's the biggest, bit of it all, of why I think having a guide dog is much, much better than having a cane. The advantage. The disadvantage, though, of having a guide dog versus a cane is because it's a living, breathing creature, they can get sick, like my dog has today, actually. And, and if that, a lot more care involved. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but just, to put it out there, of all people, this is like your child now. You have a lot more of a responsibility, where your cane, you don't have to really tend to your cane. It just gets put down, or, put somewhere, really. Just as long as you keep track of it, But if you're someone who doesn't really want, to be taking care of somebody else, somebody else's well-being, having a dog is not the thing. To me, that's not a disadvantage, but it could be a disadvantage to somebody else. They may not want to deal with that, or if you're allergic to dogs. Well, actually, if you are, they have what they call some other type of dog, like poodles. I know my school does poodles if you're allergic to dogs, because it has human hair. Or you may be scared of dogs, or, so that's a disadvantage. If there's some type of problem stopping you from getting a dog for that reason, well, cane, I guess you obviously would stick with. But you don't have to tend to a cane, so, that's the thing. And like I said, if they're sick, they may not be able to go out, and not feel up to something, and get sick at the wrong time. Stuff can happen, and you have to stay on them, also their behavior. Most guide dogs, mine does, behaves very, very well, but there can be some issues sometimes, and you have to tend to that as well. Cane, you don't have to do any of that. So, and unfortunately, a dog can become deceased. And you gotta deal with that too. forbid, hopefully that ain't happening anytime soon. You know, so, again, with it being a living, breathing creature, so it's hard. It can be hard and very complicated for that reason. So, you know, really, really hard. Like, I have talked to people who have had like 8 dogs. You know, you go through them. I mean, you go through canes with tips and stuff, but you know, this is something you actually can grab a hold of, and they become your friend. You know, and to get another one to replace that, you know, it's something you become attached to, and it just can be an emotional roller coaster. So if you don't want to go through that, you know, then, you know, I guess not having a guide dog is the best fit, you know, but to me it's all worth it, and I'm guide dog all the way, but I just wanted to put it out there. Actually, going back, another advantage actually of having a guide dog though, and going back to the advantages, made me think of it when I was just saying what I said earlier. They can be a companion. Like I said, you know, the attachment factor. They're not only a tool for you to get around mobility-wise, they become your best friend, and you know, you don't feel as lonely. Also, security. They're like your security watchdog. You know, I feel, and I've heard other people say that they feel much better traveling. I know I do. I've noticed a big difference in myself, traveling wise, and traveling more and taking more risks since I've had my dog than opposed to before I had her. That I just feel safer trying things with her than opposed to not having her. So that has enhanced my independence and mobility in that way. So let me know what you think. Comments, questions are welcome. Thank you again for watching, and have a nice day.